Jonathan Fowler is the spokesperson for the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees and joins us now. Jonathan, there is so much murkiness around what food's going where, how it's getting through. I wonder if you could give us your understanding of how much food is getting through and whether it's actually reaching the people who are most in need.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the programme. Murkiness is indeed the word. I mean, this is an utter humanitarian tragedy. It remains the case. The amount of food that has got in over recent days is, I mean, some are describing it as a drop in the ocean, but that would be a massively over-generous description of what has got in. You know, I mean, we need to be able to get in 500 to 600 trucks a day to meet the minimum survival needs of the population of the Gaza Strip. That has not been happening. So, I mean, a tiny amount already, the kind of aid that's been allowed in, basically just flour. I mean, the needs are overwhelming. You know, that in itself is a commodity which is not enough. So insufficient quantities of and restricted items, you know, basically restrictions on what could be brought in. And beyond that, it's also extremely difficult to distribute anything beyond, you know, further north than Khan Yunis, which is kind of it's in the south of the Gaza Strip. So, you know, the needs are not being met. The aid needs to flow. It needs to flow in an unhindered manner, and this needs to happen immediately. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Logistically, who is in charge of the food once it gets into Gaza? And what is the role of an organisation such as yours, if any?
Well, we are the largest United Nations humanitarian agency on the ground in the Gaza Strip. We have around 12,000 operational staff, and I want to underscore that our staff are working at an immense risk to their lives. Tragically, more than 300 of our staff have been killed, all too often along with members of their families. So I just want to underscore and flag that for your viewers. But, you know, what we're not able to do because of Israeli restrictions on our operations is we're not able to fully participate in the current aid operation, however feeble it actually is. I mean, we are standing ready to do our job of work. Humanitarian operations are a chain involving all parts of the United Nations system, but we're actively shut out of this, not able to operate, at least not able to operate in terms of distributions. And of course, we have the largest distribution network. All the other parts of the UN rely on our logistical chain to do that. What we are able to do, fortunately, and we are able to continue certain aspects of our work. For example, we have 19,000 patients going through our clinics, medical points, and being seen by our mobile medical teams, 19,000 every single day. We have something in the order of 35,000 children who are receiving some form of education from us. It's like a back to learning psychological support for traumatized children, these kind of things. And we also have 100,000 people in our emergency shelters, the shelters being transformed schools, notably. So we're still doing that work. The point is we're not able to play our full role because aid is not flowing in, but also because we have restrictions on our operations, which have been imposed as the result of Israeli legislation in force since the end of January.
That's interesting because what's happened overnight, Jake Wood, who was the CEO of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, he has quit. He says it's not possible to implement the Israeli plan, I think it's the Israeli US-backed plan, and stick to his principles of neutrality and independence. So what does that mean for that Israeli-backed plan, and what is your response to the news of his quitting?
Well, we had said, you know, from the very beginning, as did other parts of the United Nations, there is such a thing as international humanitarian law. There is a system which operates around the world, which is based on international humanitarian law. Reinventing the wheel is not correct because it's not logical, as it were, but it goes against international humanitarian law to create something which is seen as an alternative, and as it turns out, a pretty dysfunctional alternative. I mean, without commenting on things that we're not involved in, you know, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I mean, we had said that just because you put the name humanitarian into something, it doesn't make it necessarily compatible with international humanitarian law. And we had also said, as has the rest of the UN, you know, that the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality and independence, they are paramount in aid operations. and nothing that we were seeing suggested they would be followed. So without commenting directly on this resignation, I mean, you can see the logic in his move.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Jonathan Fowler is the spokesperson for the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees.